Welcome to Leeds. We're here today outside the Ministry of Justice to ask, even after the Supreme Court ruling, there are still men in women's prisons. The prison service are now breaking the law. We demand no men in women's prisons.
Leeds, getting ready just for the start of the protest here. Some wonderful banners. There's ours. TRA's over there.
All of this inspired by the wonderful work of Kate Coleman at Keep Prison Single Sex. Let's give her a bit of a cheer, I think, guys. This band of grassroots women got together 12 months ago, doing name of JD over there, for boots on ground activism across the country. We started with the mother banner. Behind me. Over here. It travelled to every female prison in the country. A wonderful film was made by Lily Maynard that you can see on our Twitter page. This one here. No in W prisons. The film is brilliant, so please go and have a look at the film on there. The music always gets me in the feels. In January, we galvanised local groups of women and had simultaneous protests outside every female prison. We produced leaflets to give out street tasing at various times throughout the year. It's in Bromley, Nottingham, Derby, Manchester, Leeds, York, Fulham and Newcastle. In my experience, from what we did in Newcastle just a couple of weeks ago, people really are waking up to this. It was very different to what we've done, say, even 6 weeks ago. I do think the Supreme Court ruling has brought the attention to people on the street, but we've still got to keep going outside, guys. We organised a protest outside the Ministry of Justice in London back in March. We had brilliant speakers and an excellent turnout, and thanks to Emma with her brilliant PR skills, we had positive press coverage. We gave out thousands of postcards to write to MPs. Then, the week after that, it was the Supreme Court ruling. Mixed jubilation, celebration. It was really short-lived for us because we realised that nothing had actually changed and there are still men in women's prisons. We know for certain that there are men in HMP Downview and HMP Austin Hall. So local protests were organised at Austin Hall in April and again at Downview in May. Please have a look at our Twitter page, No Men in W prisons, to see what we did on those days. Some lovely singing from the ladies there. So here we have Judith from the South, a women's rights campaigner, to tell us what's been going on in Downview.
Okay, thanks everyone for coming. So there are 4 women's prisons in the South. The main one that we're campaigning on is Downview in Surrey, as there are, we are told, 7 men housed in what is known as E-Wing. This used to be used as a mother and baby unit until 2019. Since then, it's where blokes with gender recognition certificates who pose a risk to women can be housed. Just to clarify, this is a wing, not a separate prison. So it is part of the women's prison. As you'll hear a lot today, since the ruling, which states clearly that single-sex services should only include people of that sex, not those who claim to be. This isn't a new law. It is the way the law should always have been interpreted and implemented. Earlier this month, Rebecca Paul, who is the Conservative MP for Reigate, which is near Downview, asked both the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, and Nick Dakin, who is the Under Secretary for Sentencing, about the men in Downview, and she asked when they will be moved to the men's estate. Nick Dakin said that the government are reviewing transgender prisoner policy in light of the Supreme Court ruling and will set out any changes to their approach in due course. Just to re-emphasise, these men have no right to be in the prison. The Supreme Court ruling is a clarification of the law as it has stood since 2010 when the Equality Act was passed. A service like prisons clearly needs to be single sex. They should be moved out immediately. More worryingly, Nick Dakin said E-wing prisoners are held separately to other prisoners at HMP Downview. They cannot be given any access to the general women's estate in the prison unless risk assessed as being safe to do so. If they are given access, they will be directly supervised by staff. This suggests to me that any or in fact all of these men could in fact be mixing with the women. The Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, was also at pains to emphasise that E-wing is a specific wing for trans prisoners. The worry here is that the government may well try to fool us into thinking that this is like a separate prison to Downview. So therefore it is okay to keep men in there. It isn't. On both counts, this is wrong. Okay. One of the men who is, or at least was in Downview, is someone who was formerly known as John Stewart. His surname now is Roland Stewart. He is a bloke from Brighton who murdered his husband with a samurai sword. All these men have been placed at Downview because they had stuck-on frocks that are considered too much of a risk to women. That's the irony of it. I don't care who they are, what vulnerabilities they have, real or imagined, or what crimes they've committed. Not one of them should be, or ever should have been, in a women's prison. And I would just say, maybe it would be good to give Rebecca Paul a follow and some support. She's on Facebook and X. She also has a YouTube channel. She may be on Instagram, I'm not sure. Sorry, it's Rebecca Paul, so that's Paul. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm not really going to do a speech because I can't compete with that, okay? But what I am going to say is, less than a mile away from here, there is Leeds Prison, which is a men's prison. I worked there 25 years ago. 25 years ago, they housed transsexual men and autogynophiles, transvestites. They were on the vulnerable prisoner unit, so they were well looked after. They weren't, in the 1990s, they weren't allowed to wear feminine clothes. They had to wear prison uniform, which was a sweatshirt, jeans and shoes, slip-on shoes. They were protected. They couldn't go on normal location because of not so much their transgender status, it was because of the horrific crimes they had committed against usually partners. They were on a wing with poor copers, people with drug debts, predators, paedophiles, because they were degenerates. Not a very popular word today. No one's going to love anything from over there. They're degenerate men, right? And the only reason they are getting into women's prisons is because they're grooming the MOJ. The MOJ are really woke, right on, and they have been groomed. No man needs to be in a women's prison, ever. They are well. 25 years ago, I was on wings with these men, and they fitted in. If they were ridiculous and being idiots, then yes, they'd get a slap. But they fitted in. There was care. There were doctors coming in. There was one man with a neo vagina who was looked after like NHS because there are hospitals also in HMP Leeds. Shabana Mahmood, as soon as the government changed, she started to sign off on men being put back into women's prisons. So we've got Shabana Mahmood from the disgusting, dreadful, degenerate Labour Party doing this. Kate Coleman stops this with the Tories. Kate Coleman managed to stop them going in. How many of them are in the prison? No one knows. And do you know why no one knows? Because they've all got a GRC. But I'll tell you now, you stand on the floors on the prison wing. When you look down, you can spot every fucking one of them. Huge, great big bricks. What else was I going to say? Well, that was about it really, because I wasn't really going to talk. So what I wanted us to do is to do some loud angry chants at this, because we're stood here all calm and cool, but this makes my piss boil. Okay? I'm going to say some, like, Shabana Mahmood, get them out, and we'll do that a few times. Is that all right? So with feeling, right? Shabana Mahmood, get them out! Shabana Mahmood! Shabana Mahmood! Shabana Mahmood! Shabana Mahmood! Shabana Mahmood! Thank you. And there's another sign there. There are foxes in the hen house. 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 Brilliant, thank you. Right, and then we'll do the easy one, which we all know, which is no males in female jails. No males in female jails. No males in female jails. Very good. You're very good at this. You're better than me. Right, now we'll do another couple, if you don't mind, because I can't speak over that properly. Keep prison single sex. Keep prison single sex. Keep prison single sex. Keep prison single sex. Right, another one. Women are not human shields. Women aren't human shields. Women aren't human shields. Women aren't human shields. Right, I would like to go just back to the first one, Shabana Mahmood. Public enemy number one. Shabana Mahmood, get them out! Shabana Mahmood, get them out! Shabana Mahmood, get them out!
Hello, testing. Can you hear me? As said in the introduction, my son is a gay boy, he's not a woman. and unfortunately he's gone down the trans path and he's medicalised it. And he's lovely, and he is a refugee from masculinity, but it's not women a job to run the refugee camp. So I would be terrified if he was in prison. But the correct place for him to be would be a male prison in a vulnerable persons unit, and that's where they all should be. Now I just want to talk about two men. One man is now based in Leeds, and his name's Mark Jones, but he's gone by Karen Jones and also Karen Lawson. Now, his story is that he was living with a man, I think he was called Mark Carter, and apparently they had a dispute. He was only 18, and he killed that man because he wouldn't pay for his transition-related surgery, whatever that means, makeup, fake tits, whatever. And he left that body for 3 weeks so that when he was finally found, they couldn't determine the cause of death, but it was Jones who did it. And he was sent to prison for that. But he was out in a remarkably short time, which seems to be the story with these men. So 5 days after he was released on licence, now calling himself Karen Lawson, I think he's still Lawson then, he went into a shop for transvestites, for men to perform female sex stereotypes. And whilst he was in that shop, he dragged a shop assistant into the back, rammed a lemon in her mouth, punched her in the face, and tried to rape her. And the only reason that it's not counted as rape was because by that time he was taking estrogen, which has a negative impact on sexual function, and he wasn't able to sustain an erection. Now, subsequent to that, he was recalled to prison, but he was still in a male prison. So he then took a case, I think it went to the European Court of Human Rights, to maintain that he should be moved to a female prison. And how he got that was because he wanted gender reassignment surgery. And under the rules for the gender clinics, he had to live as a woman for 2 years, whatever that means. So he took the case on the grounds that he couldn't live as a woman in the male estate. They let him have his own room, they let him have makeup, they let him have different clothing, but that wasn't enough. So the men who took the case for him, they made the case that he needed to be with his peers. That is, using women as a therapeutic aid for a man who committed a serious sexual assault on a woman. Now, the man who was talking about his sexual assault mitigated it by saying, well, he didn't actually manage to penetrate her, and it really was more motivated by jealousy than sexual desire. What the woman actually said was, I thought I was going to die. So he won that case, and he was moved to the female prison, but one of the people who helped him get there was James Barrett. Now, James Barrett was asked, what about the women who object? And what he actually said was, there'll always be that sort of woman who likes conflict. So he was moved. Now, James Barrett went on, he appears in a lot of these legal cases, but he went on to be the head of the British Association of Gender Identity Professionals. And even he got a little bit of cop on, because when they were moving men through self-ID into the female estate, he actually wrote a letter on behalf of BAGID, or whatever it's called, and said it would be naive to assume that no man will use such a loophole for nefarious purposes. So he can have kudos for that, but it doesn't overrule all the other harms he's done. So the next case, now I should mention, Karen Jones is based in Leeds, and I'm reliably informed that he goes around trying to get access to female self-defence classes. He also goes into prisons and advises them on LGBTQIAP, and he was also invited to the House of Lords by Lord Patel to advise on transgender prisoners. This is a man who committed manslaughter and a serious sexual offence against women, advising Lord Patel. Lord Patel is a registered social worker, and he is also the chair of Social Work England when two very prominent cases of social work have been investigated for gender critical views. And he also wrote a document, he convened all these people in this area to advise on prisons, and so he's deeply corrupted by this whole thing. Now, secondly, I want to talk about a man called Megan Keys. Now, Megan Keys is a trans-identified male. He was invited to the laughable Women's and Equality Committee in Parliament. And on that panel was Jeff Phillips. And what Megan Keys said was that being a sex offender is no bar to going in the female estate. And Jess Phillips, who had the perfect opportunity to contradict him, said absolutely nothing. And that was chaired by Maria Miller. So Jess Phillips, I'm afraid, she speaks out both sides of her mouth and she cannot be trusted. Megan Key as well, a probation officer from London, got in touch with me and directed me to listen to a podcast. And it was a podcast run by, the feminists, inverted commas, who call themselves intersexual. And in that podcast, he talked about his multiple sexual partners, how he loved violent sex as a woman, blah, blah. And yet that man is advising government bodies on male sex offenders, putting them in the female estate. That's done for me, thank you. No men in women's prisons.
Hi everybody, I'm Ellie from Derbyshire, and I'm going to talk about the man Lauren Jeska, also known as Michael Jameson. He's been serving his sentence for attempted murder and other offences in Foston Hall Women's Prison. Foston Hall is a women's prison in rural Derbyshire and holds around 300 women, varying in age from 18 upwards. Jessica was jailed in 2017 for 18 years for attempted murder, 2 counts of actual bodily harm, and carrying knives in public. He will be eligible for parole in 2029 and will have an additional 5 years on licence. But he did spend some time on remand, so that'll be taken into account. I want to tell you about Jessica's violence that was all captured on CCTV. And the decision to put Sarah in a male prison did not come from the I've had to print it really big because my eyesight's bad. So bear with me when I turn the pages. So Jessica drove over 100 miles to kill his victim, Ralph Nibbs. He repeatedly lunged at Mr. Nibbs with 2 long kitchen knives that he packed specifically for the purpose. He stabbed him about the head and neck repeatedly with both knives at the same time, so you can imagine that kind of attack. Shocked colleagues rushed to help Mr. Nibbs, and in the process 2 more men were stabbed by Jessica. In the end, it took 6 people to restrain Jessica until the police arrived. Jessica left Mr. Nibbs with serious life-threatening injuries, and he only survived due to the intervention of his brave colleagues, but he has been left seriously disabled for life.
We must recognise ourselves as a cog of the women's liberation movement and as part of a radical feminist framework.
The judge sentencing Jessica said it was a frenzied attack, cool and calculated. The judge also said that Jessica posed a serious risk to society in future. The Crown Prosecutor described his crime as premeditated and a savage attack. So after hearing all this, it's inconceivable that this violent man, who needed over 6 people to restrain him, was put in a women's prison. But he was. And why? Because women don't matter. There was no risk assessment for the women, no concern for their safety, no concern for the women's privacy or dignity. Sorry, it's really windy. So let's fast forward to 2023, and Dominic Raab changed the rules so that men convicted of sexual or violent crimes who were serving time in women's prisons had to be removed to the male estate. But not Jessica. He stayed put. Why? Because women do not matter. Then, on the 16th of April this year, the Supreme Court clarified that prisons were single-sex services. But Jessica, a man, is still in a women's prison. Why? Because women do not matter. So when will women matter to our Prime Minister? When will women matter to our Secretary of State for Justice? When will women matter to our Ministry of Justice? When will women matter to our Minister for Prisons? We know women matter, and that's why we're all here today. And thank you for coming. We have done a few protests outside of Foston Hall Women's Prison to say, get Jessica out, and we will continue to do so. We won't know when Jessica is moved to the male estate, as the Ministry of Justice wouldn't want to breach this violent man's privacy by talking about an individual case. So we will have to wait for that statement from the Secretary of State for Justice to say that all the men have been removed from the women's prisons and are now in the male estate. When will that be? We don't know. What we do know is that when all these men are finally removed, then women will start to matter. Until then, we will carry on protesting and saying, no men in women's prisons. Thank you.